about these cases we want to go through today. And the first is Kevin Strickland. And I've been covering this on the show for the past couple of months as a Missouri law that allowed him to be exonerated finally, even though there were a lot of people within the Missouri legal structure, like the governor, attorney general, and some of the higher ranking judges that didn't want him out. But that, I think there's a pretty solid case, and I've gone through it, how the police pressured a witness into identifying Strickland, and most of the other evidence against him is circumstantial at best. And so, with that, it seems that Pat, he's a man who was wrongly imprisoned for 43 years. I mean, that's nearly half a century, that this would be a guy that's entitled to a hell of a compensation for the state of Missouri for what happened to him. And, while I always would say go after the people who did it to him on the individual level, my guess is that some of them might be dead and probably don't have a whole lot of money that they're not getting from, government pensions anyway. So, but in Mr. Strickland's case, he ends up not getting paid. So how the hell does that happen, Pat?
Well, this is part of the problem with having a monopoly justice system. And in the case where you actually are due restitution for a miscarriage of justice, it's kind of inverse that the taxpayers would be on the hook for it. So I completely agree with you that if this were a just system, it would be the people who actually did this to him. Like the court system itself, of course, that's taxpayer funded. But in the society that we envision, it would be the courts themselves or the prosecution who would be paying restitution. And in fact, Rothbard wrote about this, I think, in Conceived in Liberty or For a New Liberty, writing about pretrial detention. But I think the pretrial detention rule would apply as well in this case, a post-conviction rule, where Rothbard kind of talked about how if you're holding someone awaiting trial, you either allow them bail, or if it ends up that you try the case and you lose, then you have to pay them restitution for the amount of time that you kept them in prison or in jail, rather, awaiting trial. So it doesn't surprise me. I took a wrongful convictions class in law school, and we were talking about this. It's a double loss, Kyle, because, well, A, you're taking away this person's life, but even if there is restitution that is ordered, these people's lives are destroyed. What someone who's been in prison since they were 18 years old, you give them a windfall of 1.5 million, which is just a pittance compared to the loss of your life. But you have nothing to, I mean, you have no life experience. You have severe emotional problems in many cases. You have no way to function in the real world. You still have to depend on friends and family. And this is a life lost.
Yeah. One thing, even like when soldiers are deployed overseas and stuff like that, they do like transition periods and stuff like that to help people ease back into a normal life. If you had spent like a long period of time in a psychiatric hospital, you would like go through classes and everything. And a lot of times these people are just kind of dropped off with enough, whatever it is. I don't know if it's still like 50 cents on the bus corner anymore or something like that, but at one point, that's really essentially what they gave people. And that is what happened to a man who was wrongfully put in a psychiatric hospital for 2 years in Hawaii. I can't remember his actual name. He gave an alias of Castleberry at one point. But anyways, again, and Strickland gets nothing from the state here. The money he got comes from a GoFundMe. So, and then, so yeah, and as you're talking about, just not knowing how to live in a world where you're just not told what to do all the time by an authority figure, and having controlling your life and all of that. I think this guy talked about like the two things he wanted to do when he got out was see the ocean and go to his mom's grave, because his mom has since died. If you think about it, 43 years, how many people in 43 years do you think after you get out of jail for that you didn't do it, but even then there's still probably some stigma attached? How many people are there to like welcome you home and to help you, like, to, you know, figure out like how to go to the grocery store, like what things cost. I'm sure the laws for like driving and everything have changed significantly since the last time, and how cars work and all this kind of stuff. He probably has to relearn. You know, I know they probably have some access to some classes in jail. Probably have like some like computer skills and stuff like that, I hope. But overall, you know, the best part of the guy's life has definitely been lost, to just completely wasted in jail, and all that time being on the taxpayer dime. You know, another thing, Pat, that I think is really important to point out, and I guess, you know, if there was like an independent prosecutor, right, who in our ideal, you know, case here, that they would have like probably some kind of malpractice insurance or something like that, right? But at least then there would have to be reforms put in place in a case like this, because it would cost the insurance company millions of dollars. There was a recent case in, I want to say Massachusetts or something, where a guy did 20 something years in jail, and then, you know, they let him out um after that amount of time. Yeah, I think it's this guy here, James Lucen, and he was hoping to get like $46 million, and a jury awarded him, I think, like 6 or 8 million or something like that. But is there any like legal standard of what, like, let's say you're wrongfully imprisoned for 10 years. Is there any legal standard of, you know, you get X amount for per year you were wrongfully imprisoned? And then I guess on top of that, is there any, you know, claim that you could make to say like, I was wrongfully convicted of murder, and so for the past 4, you know, my mama died thinking that I committed a murder. Like, how much money do you, like, how much trauma do you have from that, you know?
Those are hard. Those damages are hard to measure. And in terms of a specific rule, I can't cite one off the top of my head, but I have heard of such a thing, you know, X amount of dollars for a number of years. But in terms of like emotional damage, those are hard to quantify, and you probably have to support it with expert witnesses. And so it'd be a difficult battle. And just kind of a comment on some of the wrongful convictions stuff. The one thing I wanted to make sure I highlighted, Kyle, was the power and unreliability of eyewitness testimony. And this I've talked about this before, and I think on my show and on your show, but eyewitness testimony is responsible for a large number of these wrongful convictions, and it's very powerful. And they talk about it in this article here about how he was primarily convicted, of course, by an all-white jury. And I think that race is something that libertarians would maybe ignore to their detriment in a case like this. I think it does matter. But he was convicted by an all-white jury. The sole survivor was the eyewitness, and later tried to recant her testimony, but was then threatened by the police with perjury. And one of the problems is that juries, they just take eyewitness identifications way too seriously, and they put so much emphasis on it when really speaking, eyewitness testimony is very unreliable. People's memories change. They don't remember situations the same way. There's actually in class, when I was taking wrongful convictions, we watched a video where a bunch of things happened in the video, and then right afterwards they try to ask you like, what color was the suspect's hair? And you don't know. You just can't remember. So your memory fills in those blanks. And when you have, you know, a woman on the stand who's weeping about something really bad that happened to her, that's powerful. The jury believes it. And in this case, it caused a wrongful conviction.
Yeah. You know, I remember, Pat, growing up, and I watched a lot of like CSI and Law and Order and all those shows, and they would have, you know, the victim there, and, you know, especially on Law and Order, it's usually like a female victim, and she's like, I would never forget his face, the man who raped me. But, you know, they're not really sure about it, and at the last minute they get like the evidence, like the physical proof evidence they need to know that they got the right guy, and, you know, she identified the right person, everything like that. But that's really not how it works. And in fact, there's this recent high profile case, I think from the UK, where an author like wrote a book. I think, I forget the name. She's a somewhat famous author. Her like books have been changed into like Hollywood movies, and it wasn't like until a Netflix producer was making a show about her, and I think like with her, and like realized inconsistencies and realized some guy spent the wrong time in prison. You know what I mean? And yeah, like it's hard to tell somebody, right, who's been the victim of a crime like this, like you might not remember correctly the man who raped you. But yeah, that is kind of the case. But that, I don't think that's actually what happened here. I think this woman was intimidated into giving false testimony by the police, which is a crime on the behalf of the police a little bit. I think, at least from a statement that a member of her family gave, she had said that she still had like the brain matter of her friends on her. So she was like the survivor. There's 4 people who were shot. She was the one that lived. She still had like the blood and brain matter of her friends on her when they brought her into the lineup. And of course, she picked whoever was they told her to, because she wanted to get that off of her and put this all past her. And I think that is typically what happens with people in a situation where they're immediately, especially in a very dangerous situation, but in kind of very traumatic situation, even if it wasn't particularly dangerous for them, if they saw something very horrific, they don't necessarily remember it, and they want to put it past them. And so then the cops saying like, hey, just tell us who you saw and we could put this past you, they're going to pit someone, but then their brain's going to implant that memory of that's the face. But it's all a psychological game that's been played.
Yeah. And I was looking through the story, and though there weren't a lot of details in this story about exactly what had happened. So and you've been following this for a while, haven't you?
Yeah, past couple of months on the show.
Right.
Because there was like the Missouri government didn't want to let him out of jail for whatever reason. So yeah, one thing I remember from the late great founder, one of the founders of the Libertarian Institute, Will Grigg. At the time he died, he was covering the case of Christopher Tapp, who was wrongfully imprisoned, and it's now been admitted and everything, although it hadn't been when Will Grigg had died. But during his coverage of that, at the end, the government was, I think, attempting to bully him into taking an Alford plea, which would be like, you could convict me, but I think I didn't do it. And it's kind of a way for everybody to just agree to let this guy out of prison, and just everybody goes on with their life. And Will Grigg was really imploring, and I don't know if Christopher Tapp was able to listen, but he was really arguing that like, hey, don't do this, continue to fight, because that's going to give you the legal standing to then take your fight to them. And so is that like the way it works?
Well, without knowing like the specific instances of exactly what happened, I know I've covered Alford pleas before. Like in law school, I did an appeal on it. Like, what happens if one side consents to the Alford plea, but the prosecution doesn't? Anyway, it was an appeal issue, but yeah. So I mean, it's possible. I would think that this Christopher Tapp's attorney would like illuminate the options and the consequences and possible consequences for him. But on like a philosophical level, I think that if you're someone in that position, it'd be very attractive to want to stick it, keep the fight up. But then you have all these things weighing, on your mind, especially like these people who are on post-conviction appeals. This is their life, and in some cases they're willing to kind of take their lickings and then just try and move on. And in that situation, I don't know what I would do. I would think I'd want to get vengeance in any way I could.
Yeah, I guess the hard thing is a lot of times, so let's say they throw out the conviction. A lot of times is, like you were wrongfully convicted, the court recognizes that and throws out that conviction. Sometimes if the prosecution refiles the charges, they will keep you in jail through the upcoming trial. And so like you could spend years in jail after the court has exonerated you of murder. And that's, I guess, a part of it too, right? And I think Christopher Tapp was younger. I don't think he had done anything near like 43 years like Kevin Strickland. But, looking at this guy, and I'm not trying to be mean to him, but like he's not in like the greatest health. Like
No.
I'm not saying that like he's on his deathbed, but like he's probably aware that like I could have a heart attack at some time, and like that could be it, especially if you're in jail. Like, you're not going to get the best health care. And so, maybe for, in some cases, you just got to like, I have an opportunity to leave jail now, and I'm going to go and just get the hell out of here while I can, rather than like, feeling like you could fight another day, but maybe it's a trap. And I'm sure a lot of these people, who are wrongfully convicted, like really can't believe, well, maybe some people can and everything and are like, yep, I knew this is how the system worked. But I'm sure other people are just like astounded that they got railroaded by a system for the crime they didn't commit. And, like what it must feel like to like have, I'm sure, like, certain members of their family thought they did it and stuff like that. I mean, that has to be like mentally like a very tough thing to try to cope with and deal with. Pat, should we move on, talk about Crystal Kaiser here though?
Yeah. One last comment. I think that with the Christopher Tapp case, there might be a double jeopardy issue there in terms of he pleads to an Alford plea and then prosecution wants to refile. But I don't know.
No, I think that would be one of the reasons to take the Alford plea, is because then that's that. But if you don't take the Alford plea and they just the court exonerates you and throws out the conviction, if then the prosecutors refile, they could keep you in jail.
That sounds like double jeopardy to me, but I'm not sure.
Wait. So if they just threw out the conviction, right? They didn't like there's not an acquittal, then they could refile charges, right?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look into it.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that's. I know that I've seen it threatened before. Whether it happens or it can actually happen.
If the court throws out the charges without prejudice.
Yeah, right. Like, so, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess too, there's like a distinction of whether the court was granting a new trial versus throwing out the conviction too, right? Those may be two different legal standards that I'm conflating because I don't know the law.
Could be. Yeah, go ahead.
All right.